The Ocularis Protocol. A music box arrives on a rainy doorstep with no return address. Inside, a micro SD chip and a 4-word message that shatters everything. He never left. But by the time Emily discovers what's really on that chip, the surveillance, the identity theft, the revelation that her dead boyfriend was a predator with a handler, she's already being hunted. The syndicate that turned her into a target will make her an offer she cannot refuse. An offer that transforms her from victim to something far worse. 13 hours before Emily would step into the Ocularis Tower as its newest CEO. The rain had not yet stopped. The yellow rain boots splashed into the puddle first, sending up a small spray of water that caught the porch light. Emily Carter stood hunched beneath the hood of her red raincoat, the kind of storm-ready jacket that belonged to someone who'd lived in Portland long enough to stop believing the sun would ever return. Her red curls escaped in damp wisps, framing a face still young enough to hold wonder, but weathered enough to recognize a trap when it arrived, gift-wrapped. The brown cardboard box was soaked at the corners, the edges softening where rain had found their way through the corrugated walls. There was no return address, just her name, scrawled in jagged black marker. Emily Carter. She picked it up. The weight of it was wrong somehow, dense despite its modest size, and carried it inside. The warmth of her living room hit her like a sigh. The humidity of the Pacific Northwest compressed into 800 square feet of dark wood floors and thrift store furniture. She set the box on her kitchen counter. The silver kitchen knife slid through the packing tape with a sharp screech. Inside, surrounded by white foam peanuts that smelled faintly of artificial sweetness, was a music box. Walnut wood, deep and aged. Inlaid mother-of-pearl flowers across the lid, catching the warm amber light from the floor lamp. The kind of thing someone had chosen with care. The kind of thing that belonged in a grandmother's bedroom or a collector's vault, not in the hands of a woman who still had boxes unpacked from a movie 2 years ago. She wound the small brass key on the back. The mechanism engaged with a soft click. Claire de Lune began to play, but something was wrong with the tempo. The notes stuttered, clicking every third beat like the music box had been wounded. Emily tilted it in her hands, her thumb catching on a slight protrusion in the velvet lining. She pressed. The bottom gave way with a soft pop. A black SanDisk micro SD chip lay in the exposed compartment. Beside it, a scrap of white paper with 5 words in neat handwriting. He never left. The music box continued its broken song, each stuttering note now a rhythm of dread. Night had settled into the walls by the time Emily slid the chip into her laptop. Her home office was small, just enough room for a desk, a chair, and the weight of questions she'd been avoiding for 6 months. The MacBook Pro glowed blue, casting her face in an eerie light. Her pupils reflected the screen like polished glass. A single folder occupied the desktop. Project E. She double-clicked it. The first file that opened was a screen recording. It took her a moment to recognize her own desktop, but it was from 6 months ago, when Mark was still alive. When Mark was still here, still occupying the space in her bed and the gaps in her daily routines. The cursor on the screen wasn't moving the way she moved. It was faster, more deliberate. It opened her banking app. Portland Trust. She watched the cursor navigate to a transfer screen. Watched it input an amount, $500. Watched it confirm the transfer. Watched it delete the confirmation email. The timestamp was her birthday. Emily's hands went cold. The second file was a webcam recording. The infrared footage of her own bedroom, grainy and green. Emily sleeping, her breath rising and falling. Then the bedroom door opening. Mark entering, but not to go to the bed. To the nightstand. to her phone, his fingers moving quickly, installing something. An app, a tool, a lock. He smiled at the camera before leaving. A whisper escaped Emily's throat, barely more than a sound, but it filled the small office like a scream. You were never there to protect me. The rock came through the sliding glass door at 2:47 a.m. The shards exploded outward like diamonds, thousands of them, each one catching the moonlight as they fell toward the living room carpet. Emily had been sitting on the sofa, still holding her laptop, still staring at the frozen frame of Mark's smile. The sound of breaking glass registered first as something abstract, then as something immediate, then as wrong. She dived behind the sofa as the dark silhouette stepped through the frame. The boots crunched on broken glass. The shadow carried something heavy, a maglite, its beam cutting through the darkness like a weapon. Emily's hand found the ceramic lamp on the end table. Her muscles coiled. The intruder lunged over the sofa. The maglite swung down with force that would have shattered bone. Emily rolled left. The light hit the floor with a hollow thud, and the impact sent a strobe-like flicker across the walls. She stood and swung the lamp. The impact was clean. The ceramic shattered against the intruder's head. For a moment, time seemed to pause. The broken pieces hanging in the air like a constellation, the intruder's body suspended in shock. Then gravity reasserted itself. Blood, dark in the moonlight, spun from their brow. The intruder stumbled backward toward the broken door. Footsteps in wet grass, a retreating silhouette swallowed by the rain. Emily stood in the wreckage, her chest heaving, her hands shaking so badly she couldn't feel them anymore. The lamp cord was still in her grip. The rain drummed against the broken glass like an applause that would never end. The blood trail was easy to follow in the morning light. Dark, dried droplets across the shared lawn toward Ben's side door. Emily had waited until dawn, until the rational part of her brain had finished screaming at the animal part that wanted to run. She'd chosen the heavy wrench instead. It felt solid in her hand. It felt like the only truth left in the world. The side door was slightly ajar. Dim orange light spilled from the crack. She pushed it open with the tip of her boot. The garage was nothing like Ben's garage. It was nothing like any garage Emily had ever seen. Server racks climbed toward the ceiling, their LEDs blinking in hypnotic patterns. Blue and green and red, pulsing like the heartbeat of something enormous and inhuman. The air temperature was Arctic, maintained by cooling fans that screamed their high-pitched whine into the dark. On the center desk sat 6 monitors. Each one displayed a different room in Emily's house. Her bedroom, her kitchen, her living room, her home office, her bathroom, her bedroom again, from a different angle. All of them live feeds, all of them showing the empty spaces where she used to exist. In the swivel chair beneath the screens sat Ben Aris, her neighbor from 3 houses down. They'd waved at each other in the driveway. He'd borrowed her extension cord once. He was wearing a bloody rag around his head, the gauze already soaked through. His eyes were red and distant. He wasn't typing. He wasn't. He was staring at the main screen, where a countdown flashed in red. System purge, Oro 4, Wogjao. I didn't want to, Ben said, his voice hollow. They have my sister. The wrench felt lighter in her hand suddenly. Still heavy, but lighter somehow. Emily set it down on the edge of the desk. Who is they? Ben pulled up a logo on the main screen, a stylized white eye with a digital iris that rotated. The Ocularis. His fingers flew across the keyboard. A chat window materialized. If the Carter girl sees the music box content, kill her. The music box was Mark's insurance policy, Ben said, his voice cracking. He wasn't your boyfriend, Emily. He was a field operative for a mass surveillance experiment. You weren't a relationship. You were a deployment. On the monitors showing Emily's house, the rooms remained empty. Waiting. Watching. He was recording everything. Ben continued. Every password, every moment, every place you went, every person you called, your whole life was a data set. The black SUV didn't come quietly. It screeched into Ben's driveway with the fury of a predator that had already made its kill and was simply conducting the formality of feeding. Two men in tactical vests, faces obscured by balaclavas, vaulted from the vehicle. One carried a crowbar. The other carried a suppressed pistol. "We need to go," Emily said. But her feet were still rooted. The first man smashed the garage window. The glass became a spiderweb of cracks. He reached through, his gloved hand finding the lock mechanism. Ben tried to block him. The man drove a knee into Ben's stomach, and the sound that came out of Ben's mouth was something between a gasp and a moan. Emily moved without thinking. She grabbed the soldering iron from the bench, still hot, still smoldering from whatever she'd been working on before the end of the world. The orange glow of the tip was bright in the dim garage. She lunged. The soldering iron met the gunman's arm. The fabric of his tactical vest smoked and darkened. He screamed, a sound so loud and raw that it seemed to fill the entire space, and dropped the pistol. The gun clattered against the concrete, skittering across the floor like a small black insect. "Go," Emily said, grabbing Ben's arm. "Go." They scrambled toward the back storage door. It swung open into a wooded alley that smelled of rotting leaves and wet earth. They landed hard on asphalt still slick from the night's rain. Behind them, the garage door slammed shut. The motel room was the color of surrender. Stained carpet, a bed that sagged in the middle, a shower that hadn't been properly cleaned in years. The window looked out onto the empty parking lot where Ben's Corolla sat like an animal hiding from hunters. Ben sat on the edge of the bed, Emily's laptop across his knees. His fingers were shaking as he plugged the micro SD chip into the machine. "It's not just a memory chip," he muttered. "It's a hardware key, a cryptographic authentication device. Without it, you can't access the second layer." The screen flickered. A directory populated, thousands of names arranged in neat rows. Each one had a column labeled Primary Handler. Emily leaned closer. There was her name. Emily Carter, listed under Mark's entry. Mark Vance, Primary Handler. But she wasn't alone. 3 other women were listed beneath her own name. Sarah Chen, Amanda Kozlov, Jessica Reeves, all in the Portland area, all with the same primary handler. "What does this mean?" Emily asked, though part of her already knew. Part of her had known the moment she'd seen the webcam footage. Ben double-clicked Mark's name. A map of Portland appeared, rendered in red and blue and outlined in precise borders. Pulsing red dots marked every location, every address. The city broken down into zones, each zone into neighborhoods, each neighborhood into individual houses that glowed like wounds. He was the field operative, Ben said. But there were others. Hundreds of them, scattered across the country, each one with their own portfolio of targets. "This isn't a surveillance experiment, Emily. It's a recruitment mechanism." The map zoomed in on a single address. Emily's address. "They get close to you," Ben continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "They document everything. They catalog you. The ones who cooperate, the ones who stay quiet, who accept the money they'll eventually offer you, they become nodes in the network. The ones who don't cooperate." He trailed off. He didn't need to finish. Emily had already seen what happened to those ones. The library basement hummed with the white noise of 1,000 machines working together. Ben was hunched over a server terminal, his fingers moving with the precision of someone who'd practiced this moment 1,000 times in their head and prayed they'd never have to execute it. A progress bar crawled across the main screen. Uploading to public domain, 42%. Emily stood guard at the heavy steel door, the wrench still in her hands. Her shoulders ached, her throat was bruised where the enforcer had grabbed her, but her hands were steady. "How long?" she asked. 5 minutes, Ben said. "Maybe less." The progress bar ticked upward, 43%. "The broadcast will reach the FBI," Ben continued. "Once it's in the public domain, they can't contain it. They can't make it disappear. The exposure is the only thing that keeps us alive." Emily wanted to believe him. The wrench felt heavy in her hands because she didn't. The steel door exploded inward with a force that bent the hinges like cardboard. The enforcer was a massive man in a gray suit, the kind of person who occupied more space than their physical dimensions should have allowed. He moved with the efficiency of a machine. His gloved hand shot out and grabbed Emily by the throat. He lifted her against the metal server racks. Sparks flew from the impact. Air cut off. Emily's vision began to narrow at the edges, the world compressing into a small tunnel of gray light. The wrench fell from her hand. She kicked upward, her boot finding the enforcer's knee. There was a moment, just a moment, where she thought it might work, where she thought the kneecap might buckle, where the angle might break the trajectory of whatever violence he was about to inflict. But the enforcer didn't flinch. He didn't even breathe harder. He simply adjusted his grip and reached for Ben with his other hand, fingers already pulling the taser from his belt. Emily's vision was pulsing now, each pulse a message from her dying brain. She saw the server racks glinting beside her head. She saw the cables. She saw a loose power cable dangling from the wall, its copper conductors exposed and gleaming. She reached for it with both hands. The electricity that came through the wire was immediate and absolute. Blue arcs danced between the enforcer's chest and the wire. His body convulsed, every muscle locking in synchronization with the current. His grip on Emily's throat loosened. She fell. Air crashed into her lungs. The world expanded again. She gasped and choked and felt her legs give way beneath her as the enforcer collapsed, his body smoking faintly against the concrete floor. Ben grabbed the laptop. The progress bar showed 58%. He tried to run, but the enforcer's massive fist came up with a final spasm, and the laptop screen shattered. Liquid crystal bled across the keyboard. The progress bar disappeared. The upload was severed. The data hung in the digital void, incomplete and unreachable. 58% of the truth, trapped in limbo. They scrambled out a high basement window and landed hard on wet pavement. The alley stretched before them, dark and narrow, offering the promise of escape. They ran for perhaps 10 seconds before the headlights came on. 3 sets of them, all at once, arranged in a line that blocked the end of the alley. The engines rumbled to life, and the headlights flared so bright that Emily couldn't see anything except the afterimage burned into her retinas. Long, distorted shadows stretched behind them on the asphalt. "The music box," Ben said. His voice was strange, thick with realization. He pulled it from his jacket pocket and held it up. In the glare of the headlights, Emily could see it clearly for the first time since the night it arrived. The walnut was beautiful. The mother-of-pearl flowers caught the light. And somewhere inside that craftsmanship was a blinking red LED. "The signal is coming from inside this," Ben said. "It's a beacon. They've been tracking us the whole time." He tried to smash it against the brick wall. Once, twice. The wood didn't give. The reinforced steel inside the walnut frame held firm. No crack appeared, no splinters flew. On the third attempt, Ben simply stood there, holding the music box, looking at Emily with an expression that had transformed from determination into something that looked almost like acceptance. A voice boomed from an SUV loudspeaker. Distorted, electronic, inhuman. "Release the key, Mr. Harris, and the girl lives." Ben looked at Emily. His face was a mask of something Emily couldn't quite name. Not quite grief, not quite resignation. Something deeper. Something that looked like he'd just made the only choice that had ever mattered. He tossed the music box into a puddle between them. Then he stepped toward the cars. "No," Emily said. But the word had no weight. It dissipated into the rain. Two agents materialized from the darkness, their tactical vests catching the headlight glow. They grabbed Ben, one on each arm, and moved with the efficiency of people who'd performed this action 1,000 times before. He didn't struggle. He didn't scream. He simply let himself be taken. The SUV doors opened and closed. The engines revved. Tires spun against the wet asphalt, throwing muddy water in a spray that washed over Emily, covering her in the detritus of the city and the street and the end of hope. The vehicles pulled away. The alley returned to darkness. The only light came from the music box, half submerged in the puddle, its green LED steady and patient and absolutely certain. Emily stood alone in the dark, her clothes dripping, her hands shaking. The music box rested in the water like something waiting to be discovered all over again. She waited until 4 a.m. to stop moving. Ben's abandoned Corolla was parked 3 blocks away, hidden behind a defunct apartment building that smelled of mold and human despair. Emily sat in the passenger seat, the music box beside her on the beige upholstery. The rain had stopped. In the absence of rain, Portland was just a city of old highways and older houses and people trying to wake up to another day they hadn't asked for. Emily opened the music box. The hidden compartment was still there. The SanDisk chip was gone. The syndicate had taken it. But they'd left something else. Something they either hadn't known was there or hadn't cared enough to retrieve. A photograph. 2 inches. Glossy. Colors slightly faded from age. A graduation ceremony. Mark was standing in the center, smiling that smile he'd practiced in the mirror 1,000 times. The one that said, "I love you," and meant, "I own you." With his arm around Mark's shoulders was an older man. Emily's father. Wearing the same white dress shirt as Mark. Wearing the same smile. Wearing an identical pin on his lapel. A stylized white eye with a digital iris. The ocularis eye. Emily's hands began to shake so hard the photograph tore at the edges. "You gave me to him," she said to the empty car. To the dark city beyond the windshield. To the father who'd uploaded her into this system like data into a hard drive. She looked at the music box again. The blinking red light had shifted. It was no longer red. It had turned a steady, patient green. Microphone, not beacon. The green light meant transmission. They were listening right now. Emily grabbed the music box, her knuckles turning white against the wood. The green light reflected in her dark pupils like something alive, like something watching back. The Channel 6 news van was parked exactly where it always was on Tuesday mornings, outside the Ocularis glass tower. 3 stories of steel and reflective glass that caught the sunrise and threw it back at the city like a taunt. Emily approached the van from behind, moved quickly through the side door, and found a technician hunched over a bank of editing monitors. He jumped at the sight of her. Emily shoved the music box into his hands. "Broadcast this, every channel, now." She slammed the micro SD chip into the deck. Her other hand came up, wrench in grip, hovering over his main console. Not quite threatening, just close enough that he understood. The technician's fingers flew. The mixing board lit up like a Christmas tree. Faders moved. The Ocularis logo appeared on all the monitors simultaneously. Then, it was replaced by video footage. Mark's face, blown up across every screen in the van. The footage of him installing the surveillance app on Emily's phone at 3:14 a.m. Text appeared beneath the video. Mark Vance, Agent 419. "Who else is there?" Emily asked. The technician didn't answer. He just kept working. His hands were shaking worse than Emily's. Field operative for Ocularis Network. Identity theft specialist. Victims documented 47. Confirmed alive 12. The broadcast went live. Emily could see the waveforms peak in the red. Every network in Portland, every television in the city. The music box was silent now. The green light had faded. She walked out of the van without looking back. The crowd had already started gathering. Morning commuters stopping their cars. People on their phones already, filming the moment the truth became public, and dominating the giant LED screen that usually displayed stock prices and weather reports. The footage of Mark and Emily's father, their faces blown up to 50 feet tall, their crimes documented for anyone with eyes. Emily stepped out of the van and walked toward the Ocularis building. The woman waiting for her was dressed in white. Not the white of purity or innocence, but the white of authority. A tailored suit, sharp lines, blonde hair pulled back tight enough to lift her face into perpetual surprise. She was flanked by security, but she dismissed them with a gesture as Emily approached. This was the director. She looked at the giant screen showing the footage. Then she looked at Emily. And then, impossibly, she began to clap. The applause was slow, deliberate, hollow. "You've just completed the final stage of the orientation, Emily," she said, her voice carrying the warmth of someone discussing a well-executed business transaction. Emily's phone buzzed. She pulled it from her pocket. An unknown number had sent a text. "Transfer complete, $10,000. Welcome to the board." Beneath the text was another notification. Her banking app had updated. She opened it and saw her name, Emily Carter, listed as a new account holder with a 10-digit balance. $10 million. Enough to disappear, enough to buy a continent and never hear the name Ocularis again. But her name had been added to another list as well. On the Ocularis tower, the giant LED screen shifted. It displayed the corporate directory now, names and faces and titles. And there, in a position that hadn't existed 5 minutes ago, was Emily's name. Emily Carter, CEO. "What is this?" Emily asked, but she already knew. "It's your membership," the director said. "Mark was going to bring you in eventually. You were always meant for something more than just being a target. You have the right kind of mind, the right kind of rage, the right kind of hunger for power." The director stepped closer. "We expose ourselves just enough to terrify people into joining us. The surveillance, the murder, the predation. It's all part of the recruitment process. Some people run, some people die. And some people, the exceptional ones, they understand that the only way to fight us is to become us." "I'm not joining you," Emily said. The director smiled. "You already have. The second your face went on that screen, the moment your name appeared as CEO, you became part of the network. Any attempt to expose us further will only expose yourself. Any attempt to shut us down will only shut you down. You're not an outsider anymore, Emily. You're one of us now." Emily looked at the music box in her hands. The walnut had been worn smooth by the journey. The mother-of-pearl flowers were still perfect, still beautiful, still hiding the machinery inside. She walked to the nearest storm drain and dropped the music box through the grate. The splash echoed from far below. The green light was swallowed by darkness. I'm going to burn this house down with you inside it, Emily said, her voice steady. I'm in now. The glass doors of the Ocularis tower slid open with a soft, pneumatic sigh. Emily stepped inside, and the doors closed behind her. The lobby was all white marble and recessed lighting, the kind of space designed to make ordinary people feel small. On every monitor that covered the walls, and there were dozens of them, the same image repeated. The Ocularis eye, digital iris rotating, pulsing, watching. Emily walked past security without stopping. They didn't try to stop her. They already knew who she was. The monitors had already announced her arrival. The machines had already cataloged her descent and her ascension, and the exact moment the victim became the victimizer. The elevator door opened before she pressed the button. The button for the executive floor was already highlighted. As the elevator rose through the building, Emily could see the city through the glass walls. Portland below her. Thousands of people living their lives. Thousands of people who had no idea that they were being tracked, that their data was being packaged and sold. That somewhere in this building, somewhere in the digital infrastructure she was now responsible for managing, their entire lives were being converted into profit. The elevator slowed. The doors opened. A conference room. A table made of dark wood. Chairs waiting. And from every angle, from every monitor, from every camera hidden in the ceiling fixtures, the director was watching. Not the director. Them. The collective consciousness of Ocularis, represented through 1,000 screens and 1,000 employees and 1,000 points of surveillance that had turned a city into a body that they could see into and feel and control. Emily sat at the head of the table. On the first monitor in front of her, an image appeared. Ben Aris sitting in a cell, alive, but imprisoned in the one place where no exposure could reach him, where no public broadcast could access, where he would remain a permanent hostage to Emily's continued cooperation. You can save him, the director said, her voice coming through every speaker in the room. All you have to do is maintain the network. All you have to do is never try to expose us again. All you have to do is become exactly what we've already made you. Emily stared at the monitor showing Ben. She reached out and touched the screen. The image didn't change. His face remained fixed in that expression of resignation that had stayed with him since the moment he'd made his choice in the alley. Since the moment he'd offered himself as collateral for Emily's escape that didn't escape at all. What do you want me to do? Emily asked. Your job, the director replied. Run the network. Recruit the next generation of handlers. Find the next 1,000 girls like you. Bring them in. Break them. Build them into something useful. And understand, Emily, that resistance isn't an option anymore. It's never been an option. You were always meant to be here. The monitor showing Ben flickered. For just a moment, Emily saw something else. Not Ben in the cell, not a hostage in a prison, but a reflection. Her own face, repeated across the screen. Her own eyes, watching her own descent. Her own future, documented in perfect digital clarity. The reflection faded. Ben reappeared on the screen, unchanged. Emily's hands were steady as she pulled out a notebook and began to write. The machine would continue. The network would expand. The city below would continue to wake up to days they hadn't asked for, unaware that every moment of their existence was being translated into data, into profit, into the operating system that the director called Ocularis. And Emily Carter, once a target, once a victim, now CEO of the empire that had destroyed her, would be the one to make sure it happened. The sunrise outside the windows of the conference room was impossibly orange. It painted the glass tower in shades of blood and gold. In the distance, the city was beginning to move, traffic flowing, people emerging from their houses. A Tuesday morning like any other Tuesday morning, except for the moment when everything had shifted. Somewhere in the building, in a cell that didn't officially exist, Ben Aris was counting the hours until this day would end. It never would. The machine had converted Emily from victim into instrument, from girl into node, from person into process. And now it would continue, measured in the rhythmic pulse of digital light, in the systematic surveillance of 1,000 screens, in the patient accumulation of data that would turn an entire city into nothing but a source code waiting to be parsed. The end was just the beginning, was just the